Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, some time ago, I was spending, well, this is in the summer when we actually had a little bit of sunshine before the old chemtrailers came out and started to put that thick blanket of cloud, or decided to put hurricanes on the other side of the world, or douse us in continual rain and threaten the farmers and their food, as they are doing now. I was attending an event called the Sounds Beautiful Festival. You may have come along and we may have shaken hands. You may have enjoyed it, as I'm sure you did. And if you didn't, I think they're doing it next year. So do come along, and I've already been asked to do that. Get the plug in early. Anyway, whilst I was there, I met this very lovely gentleman who said, I'd like to interview you. And I said, oh, all right then. That's very kind of you. It's always an honour when somebody comes up and actually wants to talk to me about perhaps not just what I do, but a little bit of my background. His name was Willsy, and he works for an outfit, or has set up his own journalistic outfit, freedom outfit called Resistance GB, and he joins me now. I thought it would be worth reciprocating the interview and find out all about him and Resistance GB. Hello, Will.
Hello, and it's great to be here. I'm almost getting a sense of deja vu.
Yes, well, had a little bit of an issue technically there, where one fool pressed the wrong button, and that fool was me. So we've already done it. I hope you enjoyed it, ladies and gentlemen. It saves a hell of a lot of time if you've already watched it, but of course you haven't. Willsy, thank you so much. The last time that we spoke in that interview that you did, we were in a gazebo in the field just away from the main arena, but we could still hear the music pumping. We had children running around. It was a great event. And it's the sort of thing I like to go to and meet the people who watch the show and who have opinions to share with me. Is that a reason that you were there?
Oh, definitely. So what we do on Resistance GB is we cover anything related to freedom, anyone we believe who's standing up for freedom. Obviously, we expose any criminality going on by government. But yeah, it's wonderful going down to these freedom events. So we went down to Stand in the Light, which was wonderful. Obviously, you've got a stand in the park uniting with the light paper, Daz's outfit, which is great. And then Sounds Beautiful was fantastic. And then we also went to Hope Festival in the summer. So we went to three different freedom festivals. And we just need more of these events, I think, to bring people together and build essentially a parallel society. Because I know for me, I've got to say, I'm actually extremely lucky. As you've already heard this morning before we started recording, I live in a bit of a sort of freedom bubble around other freedom people, which is lovely. But for a lot of people, they come up to me and they say, it's wonderful listening to you. It's wonderful hearing what you do. It's wonderful seeing you go out and cover these protests, these other freedom events. Whether it's we went down to the Together event recently. We'll be going down to the UK Column event at the weekend. We went down to even the Reform conference. We've gone to all of these festivals. We cover all of these different events, and it's great because it brings people together. There have been wonderful protests. Fiona's protest recently. Then you had Monty Nacho's protest with Stand Up X. We love covering these events because they bring people together, and they're bringing them together to support freedom music. I mean, we're working now with Defiance Records to host different music videos by them, because they're now a freedom record label, which is fantastic. And I think it's bringing everything together in a sort of more professionalized setup. Obviously, everyone's still broke and no one's really making any money, but that's the way it works when you're doing the right thing. I mean, you don't really get rewarded for doing the right thing, do you?
Not certainly not financially, but I
Spiritually,
think
spiritually, you get
spiritually, and
rewarded.
the people who watch our content are very grateful that somebody somewhere has put their head above the parapet and is trying to get information, real information, and the truth out there.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, when we started, um, I mean, I've, I mean, we talked about this, touched on it briefly before. I mean, I've always sort of questioned the system because when I was a kid, I mean, most people haven't been through the government taking away all of their freedoms. I think the lockdown was the great breaker for people. I think it sort of pulled the veil away, and the mask slipped, and everyone could see what was going on, or a lot of people could see what was going on. I think I was awake to this, or some of it, a lot earlier. I was awake to the power of the government. I mean, when I was a kid, I was put in the so-called care system.
Right.
And when you have everything in your life taken away from you by the government, you learn not to trust the government. You learn that actually the government is your enemy, and you should take these things seriously. I mean,
Yes.
you need to get involved somehow, and a lot of people, have this sort of boomer mentality of being a bit blasé about politics and letting politicians do what they want. And I don't think we can do that. I think we need to be profoundly involved because otherwise people are going to be harmed. I mean, just look at a simple one is look at how many people got killed in the Iraq War. You know,
Well, exactly. I mean, why? It's only governments and those sort of people who start the wars. It's not the people who are actually fighting on the ground who wanted the war, but they're being trained and they follow the orders, and they're the ones that suffer,
yeah, yeah,
and and of course their families as a result of that.
yeah, and I mean, if you're just a sort of casual observer and you just buy into what the mainstream says, then you'll be all gung ho. Oh man, this guy's got weapons of mass destruction. He's going to nuke the whole world.
Mm.
But I think everyone has a duty to stand up to their government because you've got to remember you are funding the government. You're always funding the government through your taxes. They are able to exercise power in your name. So you've got a duty to mitigate that at least, if not actively do damage to the government and their goals.
And yet, the way that democracy, which is a dodgy word these days anyway, because it is mob rule, but democracy sort of decrees that really we, the people, should be telling these guys what we want and what we want for us, because they are working for us. They are our public servants. And yet somehow they don't seem to have got that message. They seem to think, oh, no, 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 we're the ones in charge and you do as we say. How has that managed to be flipped the other way?
Well, I think what's happened, and I'm speaking here as a sort of history tutor, um, I think what's happened is everyone's become wedded to this idea of a popularity contest. And if you look at, democracy or even ochlocracy, so ochlocracy is the sort of Greek for rule by the mob. That's not a system of government in which you want to live. That's um, you know, uh, 10 wolves and a lamb voting on who's for dinner.
Mm.
You don't want 51% of the population voting to execute the other 49%. That's not okay. Or at least, well, to murder the other 49%. I mean, there are quite a few people in our society now who do need to be held to justice. But fundamentally, traditionally, our country has always had fundamental rights to life, liberty, property, as outlined by John Locke. But you can go back further and further. You can go back to the Magna Carta. If you look at Henry de Bracton, he said, and this is sort of to uh, paraphrase, he said, the law makes the king, and so the king is under the law. The idea of that is the king, in and of himself, is not above the law. He can't just do what he likes. He's in his role, in his office, to do a job. And that
Mm.
job is to protect us, to protect our fundamental rights. If he's violating that, then he doesn't have the power. He doesn't have the protections of being the king, and he needs to be deposed. And we've done that throughout our history. I mean, we brought down John, although he wasn't killed. He died of disease shortly afterwards. But we brought John to Runnymede and we made him sign the Magna
King
Carta.
John, yeah.
Yeah. And then we've got a raft of kings. Obviously Richard the Third, or Richard the Second before that, because he was a tyrant. You've
Well, we
got
saw. I mean,
Charles the
Richard II is
First, James the Second. How look, people say the French are very uh, turbulent people who have revolutions all the time. We've actually had more revolutions. We've taken down more monarchs than the French. And we got started hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before the French. Over 500 years before the French, we were doing this, and we were
yes.
we were having our revolution.
So, I mean, what's happened to us? I mean, if you go back to 1381, when you mentioned Richard II there, and in the event that's called the Peasants' Revolt, but which actually was more the middling classes that had a revolt and marched on London, and took the king basically to sign pledges that he would end serfdom, that they could sell and buy land and various other things that were being put, all because of the poll tax that they were launching at the time. People all over the country and the surrounding counties of London. I mean, I've just read Juliet Barker's book on that, and it's an excellent piece of work if anyone's interested in it. But we wouldn't stand for it. People, and they had no mobile phones, they had no Facebook and social media to organise themselves. But incredibly quickly, the justice, or the feeling that what was not right, there came a point where, right, we're going to take a stand. But what's happened to us now? We seem to have been dumbed down to the point that we can shrug our shoulders and go, oh well, that's life. And yet we're seeing a government that is acting with huge amounts of dishonesty, tyranny, and we're seeing the police and the justice system totally corrupt, and nobody is really able to rise up and do something to stop it.
Good times make weak men make hard times make strong men make good times make weak men, and
So
thus the cycle
I fear us. Yes.
perpetuates.
Are we there at hard times make hard men?
Hopefully. It's. I just think, unfortunately, a lot of people have become sort of pacified, weakened, mollycoddled, especially by the fact that people were raised in. People call it the nanny state. I think it's far more insidious than that. We were raised in an authoritarian, socialist economy. In a country where the government believes it can, spy on you in your private home. I mean, they spy on us through our phones when we're in private. They tell us what we can and can't say. If you want to work some sort of profession, they'll say, "Oh, you need a permit from the government. You have to toe the party line. If you don't toe the party line, then you don't get the permit." And if you happen to be already working in a profession and you wake up to what's going on, then again you can be kicked out of that profession and lose decades of your life and go back
Yeah.
to earning a pittance. Why? Because you're specialized in a career. Our last podcast, we do a podcast every Thursday, was with a guy who'd been studying dentistry for 3 years, and they told him that he had to do mercury fillings. And he went, "I believe this to be harmful. Here are different bits of evidence. Here are the papers, etc., etc." He said, "You have to do it anyway," and he quit. He quit. So he gave up 3 years of his life trying to go into a profession, and now no one will have that man as their dentist. He will
Which
never
is
be your dentist, and he never can be your dentist whilst the state is in charge.
right. And yet there's an honourable man who's standing up for principles and for other people's health, and has been pushed aside.
Yep. There's a person who I would trust over just about any dentist I came across.
The thing is, we need more. We need them all to do that, because that would be the way that the system could not operate. If everybody's saying, actually, do you know what? This is wrong. This whatever it is. Mind you, we saw that when a certain medical intervention came along, and that was not questioned. The efficacy was not questioned. The amount of research was not questioned. The long-term effects of that was not questioned. When something at the speed of science was rolled out in 2021, and all those professionals who had a Hippocratic oath to do no harm seemed to forget that oath.
I think it's even deeper than that. I think it's the fact that we just have fundamental rights. I think this is testified to in our constitution. Look at Graham Moore. I'm not sure whether you've had Graham onto your podcast yet.
No.
Expert in the English Constitution. You look at Anna de Busseret, right? Really a senior lawyer, and I'd say she's learning so much about the Constitution. She's excellent. These are people who've looked back, looked at the actual books, the actual case law, the history, and they go, "Wait a second, what they're doing right now doesn't stack up." It's a bit like Animal Farm, George Orwell, where they have all the list of all the was it the 10 rules, the 10 laws on the barnyard
Right.
wall, and suddenly they're erased one by one, and no one's agreed to it. These are the rules, and they've just rubbed them out at their convenience, and they've replaced them with something tyrannical until, was it, all people are equal, but some are more equal than others.
Yes.
That's the situation in which we are ending up. So we have to prevent that with every fiber of our being. Otherwise, we will be in complete tyranny. We're moving into technocracy where the government will have just control of everything. If everything's digital, if everything, they can mandate backdoors. If you're going to give them that power, you are stuffed.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, and I think a lot of people are beginning to wake up to the digital tyranny, and the digital lockdowns that we're going to be in, albeit in the name of our benefit, which everything is sold in the name of our benefit. Um, you're a young person, only obviously a few years younger than me, but just a number because I'm not too old. But I assume that with Resistance GB, your audience then is going to equate to sort of your age group and the team that you run with. You're a co-founder of it. I mean, it gives older people hope that there are younger people speaking out. Is that what you're finding?
I I'm a little bit more pessimistic. Right? I
Oh,
think we do have some younger people on board, and it really does help to have a younger face, presenting things, which is great. However, I think we've got a real generational issue in this country. When I was raised, I wasn't raised by my parents, I was raised by my nans. So I was taught about our history, our constitution, everything that they were taught when they were in school, or actually taught by their parents, grandparents. So this is going, people born in the Victorian age were teaching them this. This is passed straight on to me. They were taught about our fundamental values. They were taught about the rule of law, trial by jury, right? 12 good men and true. The idea that you kind of double jeopardy, that you can only be tried once for a crime, innocent until proven guilty.
yeah. What's happened to
All,
all of that?
all of these things are no longer taught in the state schools, or if they are taught, they're taught very sporadically. It's an absolute disgrace.
Yes.
Why are they teaching things this way? Because it's convenient. I mean, all you need to do is look at Lord Pearson of Rannoch, and he did an excellent interview quite a while back with Carl Benjamin, I believe, talking about his experience trying to get on the it's basically the teacher training board, the board that oversees teacher training. When he got on there, he found that the entire thing was filled with communists and that it probably had been that way since the 1950s, where the Soviet Union deliberately took that over. So they train all of the teachers, they set all the standards for teacher training. And then all of those teachers are then literally training, indoctrinating all of the kids of this country. You can't fight that much of an uphill battle where you have to de-radicalize every single person that you want to come over to your opinion. And as much as we do hear these wonderful stories of, oh, I woke up and this is my story of waking up, it's always people waking up. There are very few people who start out actually awake, being raised normally. Oh, yeah, we've got these fundamental rights. Yeah, this is what happens. Yes, we someone that you don't need to persuade. Usually, it's someone who has to be persuaded. I think this is mad. We can't continue fighting an uphill battle, which is why one thing upon which I focus is people raising their own children, not having them in the state system, trying not even to send them into the public schools, because remember, most of the teachers in the public schools still come out of the state system. They've still been trained in the same way, and they're all heavily regulated by government. I think people need to move to a system where they have private tutors and the rest of it is done by parents. And I mean, this is one of the reasons that I'm a history, economics, logic tutor at Hope, which is fantastic. You actually have
Hope
kids.
Sussex, we should just
Yeah.
say for those who may not be familiar with it, who are based near Battle in East Sussex.
Yeah, because as much as I care about the journalism and exposing the truth, which is fantastic, I think at the same time, people really, really need to make sure that their first duty is their kids aren't brainwashed. Because if you're awake, but your kids aren't, your grandkids aren't, everything's dying with you.
Yes.
You're going to get older. I'm going to get older. We're all going to age out. If we don't pass that on to the next generation, that's no good. So first and foremost, everyone needs to be focused on their kids and making sure their kids are awake to what's happening. That's your first duty. Okay. And if your kids are already older, then get in there, volunteer to, do a bit of babysitting for your grandkids and make sure your grandkids are really, really, really awake to what's going on, because we can't constantly, have to spend sometimes years with people. There's so many people have spent years and years nurturing friends to try and get them to see one little bit or another little bit because they're indoctrinating into Ukraine and Israel, Palestine, and Russia. Oh, the carbon con, the world's going to end in 2 minutes. Oh, and feminism, let's bash the men, right? And oh, they believe in the alphabet agenda, and a man can become a woman and a cat can become a dog, right? And then on top of that, oh, and socialism works, and the government knows what's best for you, and oh, nothing's corrupt. Like, just levels. There are so many levels to all of these things, and if you just give children skepticism, you just say, look, use critical thinking. Here are the tools you need. Be skeptical. Then what you'll find is they'll go, oh yeah, that seems a bit dodgy. That seems a bit dodgy. That seems a bit dodgy. At the very least, even if they don't take an interest in it, they won't just be brought up.
And we were talking before we recorded in a previous attempt at recording about the fact that kids these days are very much given these insidious devices called mobile phones as babysitters. And, you'll have a 3-year-old who's been put in with some, I don't know, American cartoon to keep him quiet or her quiet, with messages within the mainstream media that is now on places like YouTube. And they're being brainwashed from a very early age with 24/7 million channels to choose from on the internet. Now, we've been talking, and I'm sure you talk about how mainstream media is it has its own narrative, and that's easily resolved by getting rid of your television and throwing it in the bin and jumping up and down and watching it explode. But these insidious devices, which everybody seems to carry in their pocket, that, as you just alluded to, there is not only spying on you, but it's also pushing messages and getting people addicted to the habit of watching. How do we reverse that?
I think, well, reverse it, that's a difficult one. I'd say before you reverse it, the first thing you've got to do is make sure your kids do not have a smart device, don't have one of those phones. If your kids really do need a phone and because you're worried they might get lost or something, give them a brick. Worst case scenario, they're playing Snake. I think we can, or maybe, ping pong.
Oh yeah, golly, I remember that back in the 70s, ping pong, beep, ding, on the television. That was the beginning. That was the slippery slope, though.
I think we can just about tolerate Snake. I know there'll be people more puritanical than me, but I think your kids should basically just have a brick if you want to give them something. Apart from that, I don't see why kids really need to be on the internet at all. Unless,
But it's sexy, isn't it? It's sexy and it's attention grabbing and it's dolphin hitting and all those,
exactly,
yeah.
which is exactly why kids should be nowhere near it.
Oh,
Because when
I
their
totally.
brains are forming, when you have one of these phones in front of them,
My God, he's got
there's
one.
yeah. When you have one of these phones in front of them, everything from the colors, the noises, all of the little,
You've
when
been
they get a
captured.
like and it goes ba-ding, 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 right? These things are profoundly addictive, especially to children. It will destroy their attention span. Best thing you can do, keep them away from the internet until they're a certain age where they can be trusted. And once you've raised them to that level, and you can then trust them, then you can let them onto the internet. Until then, I don't see why, a eight,
I,
9, 10-year-old would ever need to go onto the internet unless they're doing something with you, which you can supervise and you do that
right.
together. Except for that, keep them away. Like, give them a
Yes.
book. They need to be reading that. This is one of the things that we really impress upon parents at Hope is your kids need to be reading. They need to be reading these books. Ideally, older books, because so many of the modern books are of horribly low register.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, I
Victorian
don't.
literature.
Victorian literature. Yeah, well, I know, I agree. I tried to write some children's books about 6 years ago, and I was writing merrily away. And then I thought, I'd better go and have a look and see what's on the shelves. And there was David Walliam's, How to Fart in a Secret Corner or something. And I just thought, if that is the level of the stuff that you have to write in order to get a book deal, I'm not interested. And I stopped writing because it would seem that was terrible. But I suppose coming back to, I just wanted with the books, one of the things that perhaps people are not doing enough of is reading to their children to get them to use their imagination, because the pictures are better
Well,
in the mind.
this is where you see the destruction of the family,
Mm,
essentially, because you used to have one of the parents at home usually, whereas now you don't have that. I mean, a lot of this and a lot of the problems in our society are essentially triggered by mass migration because people are spending, you know, decades, 30 years, both adults working in order just to pay for a house. That's mental. We've got inelastic supply and we've had demands pushed through the roof by them bringing in what 10 million foreigners in the last 20
mm.
years. This is mad. Unfortunately, these people need to go home, most of them. I mean, some of them may have integrated and contributed and married British people, but apart from that, I think most of the foreigners do need to go home because our country is very overcrowded and it's destroying our social fabric.
Do you think we should? I mean, we spend a lot of time telling people what's wrong with the world, which on the one hand is quite laudable because it opens people's minds. But on the other hand, should we be spending and encouraging more people to spend time with their families and give them the tools for holistic living rather than continually saying, oh my God, this is so awful?
I think we need to move more into culture. I mean, one of the things we're doing now on Resistance GB is we're now hosting different songs by Defiance Records. So we've got Ramise's new track, Never Give Up. We've got Mad Mix's Right Wing. We've got Raw Milk Conspiracies, Misinformation Whore. We're actually hosting this music to try and get into the cultural sphere, which I think is extremely important. I think more people need to, be doing everything. More people need to be in every sphere. I mean, one thing that I and some of my friends, Laura, etc., do to keep our little group together and bond is we play Dungeons and Dragons, and I think it's one of the best things you can possibly do. It's so healthy. You have to use your imagination. You have to think outside the box. We make medieval style meals and we drink mead whilst we do it, so we're all getting somewhat plastered, and it's great. It's absolutely awesome.
And this is not a computer game, just to be clear. This is the
No,
old-fashioned, the role-playing game where you're throwing a dice or you're creating the story, and
yeah,
somebody's, if I remember rightly, is
genuine community. Like you all
yeah,
come together, right? You all arrange a night. You all come down. Usually, we'll spend a sort of weekend, right? So everyone sort of will come down on the Saturday, and we'll then hang out on the Sunday after we've been playing for 6 hours or something. So it's a whole event with a meal. This is the sort of thing that people used to do. Well, not exactly like this, but people used to go to church every Sunday. They then used to have Sunday dinner. Now, I don't believe that I'm not a Christian. I don't believe Christianity is going to solve all of our problems. I don't think that having just a reactionary thing of let's go back to, Christianity. I don't think that's going to really sell it. I don't think enough people believe in Christianity. I don't believe in Christianity, but I do believe in tradition. I do believe in community. I do think you can find your own rituals. I think what Hope's doing with having its different solstice festivals, which are just celebrations of a time of year. There doesn't need to be a religious element to it. We all come together because we're all part of a community and we have fun and we enjoy that time of year. It's a sort of passing of the seasons, a passing of time together. These things are really healthy, and we need to see these community centres build, these parallel community centres build across the whole country. Because people think, oh, Hope's just about education, or they think, oh, it's just about talks, or it's just about the festival. It's actually about quite a lot more. So we have to build this model and expand it, because this is what a lot of the foreigners do when they come to colonize here. Um, Often, if you get a load of Muslims move into an area, they'll have a community center. They'll have a lot of education that will go on around that community center, and they'll have of different events, different festivals, different celebrations. And when there's a wedding or something, it will happen at their mosque or whatever.
yes,
Well, we've just seen Jess and Davey's wedding down at Hope, which was lovely, the two peace officers.
yeah.
So we're building that sort of community, and I think that is the future, building actual, genuine fairly traditional communities. And it doesn't need to be through a Christian paradigm, or it doesn't need to be exactly the same as everything once was. But what we can
Yes.
do is we can take the best aspects of having a community and we can inject new life into it.
Yes.
I think people need to find their own traditions. Whether if you aren't interested in D&D, have a board game night. You
Well,
know,
absolutely. I mean all those old things where we've let the professionals entertain us by using that box in the corner. Get rid of that and learn your own instrument, have a sing song round the piano down at the pub, have game nights, play Ludo and cards and all those sort of things to make your own because that's what we used to do in the old days. We used
I,
to make our own entertainment.
I would challenge people. I'd say, look, set yourself a target. Say, aim for to start with once a month, right?
Yeah.
You will have your friends round to your house or one of their houses once a month, and you will sit down and you'll have a meal together. And you're going to do that every month, roughly. I understand people might not be available, etc., etc., but that is your target. If you do that regularly, you'll notice that you're building a community. That is what you need to do. So everyone, there's not much excuse for it. If sure, you might not have space at your place, one of your mates will have space. In exchange for them hosting you and dealing with that, you can cook the food, you can buy the food, you can bring the games. You can, I don't know, be dungeon master like me if you decide that that's what you're going to go for, right? You can do the music, anything. But we need that genuine community because that's what keeps us sane and that's what keeps us healthy.
Yeah. Just to tell us a bit about Resistance GB, because I think you said earlier to me that you kind of set it up after the lockdowns when you realised that the lockdowns was really an infringement of people's rights, and you thought, hang on, I've got to do something and speak out, and you went out to a rally or a protest and started to film. Tell us a little bit how you got started and then where you're going now.
So basically, I think we were all some of the first people aware that something was going on in China. People who were awake, people who were critically minded, we all, started stocking up, etc., etc., getting ready. But when the government decided that its response wasn't telling people to, or advising, as it should be, people to be sensible and to stock up and, take sensible precautions just in case, it was to say, you cannot leave your house. Otherwise, you're going to be locked up, or we're going to take your money. Well, that's house arrest. That's completely illegal. There's no judge, jury, trial. It's you must stay in your home. That is completely and utterly illegal. Millions of people went through a war to defend our fundamental rights. You can't abolish our rights and put everyone in the country under house arrest. It's just beyond illegal. It's totalitarian. If people don't have the ability to go and protest against the government, that is totalitarianism. That is the definition of it. This is what the government decided to do. And I was disgusted. And, I started looking into our constitution. And the more that I looked into it, having, been brought up in the tradition of this is important, this is where we come from, I was more and more and more disgusted. I went out to the protests and I saw the police violently attacking the protesters. I remember the one with Kate Shemirani where she was, standing up and calling everyone to come and stop the police coming in and rushing the stage, and the police were pushed back out of Trafalgar Square. But what they were doing was brutal. And what do you see the next day? You see something talking about violent protesters attacking the police. That's what you get from the mainstream media. Just pure lies. Meanwhile, I tried speaking to the police. I said, we have fundamental rights. You can't tell people they have a right to walk about freely. What about the Magna Carta? And he said, oh, we're not following the Magna Carta here. Like any police officer who says that, I mean, that's for me treason. As far as I'm concerned, treason. They should be put on trial, and I believe the penalty should involve a certain length of rope. That's as simple as it is. Like,
Right.
if you decide that you're going to try and strip the fundamental rights of Englishmen, then you are defecating on the graves of millions of people who died for our freedom. That's it.
Do you think some responsibility for that should be placed on the general public, the people in the street going, hang on a minute, why didn't we push back? Why didn't we say, hang on, in numbers, saying, you can't do this, that's not right, you're public servants, you work for us, you've overreached your authority.
I think everyone has a duty. All of the freedoms that you're given in your life are given to you by previous generations. Um, Therefore, you have a duty to uphold those for the next generation. If you're going to be, someone who just takes, and never gives, never passes that on,
Right.
then I don't think you're a good person at all. I think you're an absolute
Did,
disgrace. You have a duty to pass on what you were given, the freedoms you were given. People
were
died for
you? I
them.
mean, when you say given, I mean they are certain freedoms are inalienable rights, aren't they?
Yes,
They're
yes.
not. That by saying they're given, it means that somebody somewhere gave them to you. Well,
I can.
only God or the Creator could have given them to you.
I completely agree. These are your inalienable rights, but someone gave you a situation in which you're able to exercise them. I mean, no matter what situation you're in, you could be in a gulag, you still have your inalienable rights. But practically speaking, you're in a gulag, you're not going to have free speech, you're going to be hit with the butt of a rifle.
Yes.
Um, we've lived in a system where we've had relative free speech, where we've had relatively free movement, and all the rest of our rights, free assembly. But well, I mean, our right to bear arms has been severely infringed, but we've had certain rights in our lives, and it's our duty to pass them on. Um, it was going down to those protests, and afterwards, it was almost 4 years ago now. Um, Going down to the Simon Dolan case. And that was the last legal appeal against the lockdowns in the High Court. And the judge there in the trial, and let me just say, there are only 8 people there. So this was me just going as an individual. This was before Resistance GB or anything like that. This was me having scoured the internet, just about found out where it was going to be, what time, gone down. There are only 8 people there.
In the
There are
public gallery.
yeah, there are
In
what,
the public.
70
Yeah.
million people in the country, and
Yeah.
there are only 8 people in the public gallery, and this is locking up all 70 million, apart from obviously, the elites and having their parties and whatnot.
Yes.
And I was shocked.
Yeah.
The Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales, that's the judge who was presiding, he poo-pooed in this sort of snobbish, arrogant way the idea of any public law, which is, the byword for constitutional law, because they don't like saying constitutional law because they're all a bit snobbish. He poo-pooed any public law defense that we had fundamental rights. He said everything had to be, with reference to the, ECHR, it's etc. Right, or European Convention on Human Rights. Um, and he then started referring to what he'd seen in the newspapers. Now, the role of a judge, let's say there's a jury in a trial, the judge will
Mm.
tell a jury, whatever you hear outside this case, if you see anything from a newspaper or something like that, or you see anything on television, ignore it, turn it off, don't listen to it. Don't let anything influence your decision on this case, except for what you've heard on one side from the prosecution and what you've heard on the other side from the defense.
Yeah.
That
During
is
the court
how you
case.
operate. You do not allow the mainstream media or any other media, including independent media, to influence your decision.
Yeah.
However, this is meant to be the highest guy in England and Wales, or one of the highest guys, at least. Your Lord Chief Justice, I would assume that he's the highest. For him to say, oh, well, you know what we've seen in the Times, this is unspeakable.
Mm.
That for me is instant dismissal, instant prosecution.
So he's
Really, it
referring
should
to
be.
newspaper articles as if that was evidence,
Yeah,
which is hearsay anyway,
yeah,
and biased
yeah. And
by
he
whatever newspaper it's come from.
and he literally couldn't care less about any constitutional defense upon fundamental rights. He just couldn't care less. This is disgusting. We do have fundamental rights, and it's this, arrogance, this sort of sweeping away of the understanding that we have fundamental rights. It was always understood. It was always within, all of the old law treatises. I think I mentioned we had Graham Moore for our live in-person podcast that we do at the end of each month, last Thursday.
Right.
You know, he was a great guest. He was a great guest a couple of weeks ago because he's got all of the receipts. He's read all of these books, and you may disagree with some points that he makes, but he has the receipts. We have these rights. This is the judicial opinion for hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years. And what happens recently is politicians decide they want a really big state and they want to interfere with everyone's rights, and it becomes
Yes.
awfully convenient to do so. And therefore, they decide, oh, well, that's just one opinion that you have fundamental rights. Okay.
That's
Well,
ridiculous.
there's an alternative opinion, which is the government can do whatever the hell it likes. And suddenly it becomes, oh, well, that's a fringe opinion that you have fundamental rights. Oh, yeah, fundamental rights. Oh, that's a very extreme opinion. Oh, no, that's not valid. No, you can't argue that in the court. That's not a valid line of inquiry. And suddenly it's gone.
So there you are in the court, and you've heard this. What was your response?
I was aghast. But when you're in the public gallery, you can't say anything.
No, no, of course. You can't just stand up and challenge it. Excuse me, I think you're wrong. Ever so sorry. I do.
Really,
It's
really,
absolute shad. It's telling porkies.
To be honest, I should have probably, charged up and, bopped him on the nose or something. But
So you
instead, I
speak
went
about-
home
Yes.
and I recorded what was our first video on Resistance GB as a court report on what happened in that court. I sent
Right.
it out to a fair few Brexit groups that I was in because I obviously campaigned for our independence from the EU. And that got a few hundred views. And people really, really appreciated it. They appreciated someone telling the truth. I started, recording and releasing bits from different protests, and people really appreciated those because people had no access. I think our first video that really, really blew up was the police bullying veterans. I believe it was on Remembrance Sunday outside Parliament.
And
They
they were
were
bullying them because of.
because they were just walking around because they'd been down there because obviously their mates had died and it was a big day to remember them. And they said, "Oh, you can't walk around here because of lockdown."
Well, because these 80-year-olds might contract some virus of some description that people were telling us was reasonably harmful, and of their own volition supporting something that had happened some 80 years previously, to show that we won something, and these people are remembering their buddies who lost their lives, who gave their lives for this country. The police were bullying them. I mean, that's just disgusting.
I think these veterans were slightly younger. I think they were what, 50s, 60s. But it was they probably served in the Falklands.
Right.
Like the police are psychopaths, man, or sociopaths. I think most people, to be honest, are sociopaths because psychopathy is something that's meant to be innate, whereas sociopathy is something that's sort of learned. And when you've got a society as sociopathic as ours, most people become sociopaths. I just would like to see these people put on trial at some point because they are truly, truly evil people. And anyone who thinks that they can trust or go to the police in any way on any significant matter should think twice at least.
Well, we're certainly seeing that the police are being looked at in such a poor light that they're not standing up to Robert Peel's principles in any shape or form. So how did Resistance GB then start to escalate to what you do now, and what is it that you fundamentally do now?
So we started making videos covering everything. Where we would often, one of our main things was doing vox pops, so interviewing people and giving normal people a voice. So people out on the protest, and these are the sort of people who would never ever get a voice anywhere. No one
Right.
wants to hear what an average person has to say. Well, maybe sometimes they do. So that's what we used to do. And sometimes, a random person would speak to us and suddenly 50,000 people would watch it. And this was wonderful because we were actually putting out what people had to say about this lockdown, these lockdowns and the illegality and the criminality and what they were doing. And you've got to remember, at this time, there were very, very, very few people doing this. I mean, we had some lovely people help us out, such as Immortal Alien Subject Access, who helped funnel a few people say, "Oh, go subscribe to these guys." And then what we'd also do is we'd create sort of reports. We'd show the context of everything. We'd always give, a time when it happened, right, or a rough date when it happened, which event it was, what the
Yes.
context of the day was. We'd show the positives, not just the negatives. A lot of people would sort of clip out, oh, here's the protesters fighting with police. We like to give context of, this was an entirely peaceful event. Here's the event all day. Here's some people dancing. Here's some people singing. Here's someone on a megaphone, right? And then here's what the police do, right? I think those are far more powerful. And I think we missed out on a lot of views because we would have, like, some people would always upload that night. They always stuck everything out. Whereas for us, it was, we would usually take days to put together a really good video and put that
Yes.
out. But I think it was about the quality, and live streaming was fantastic. We took a big hit in 2022 um, because we'd basically the whole way through, like we were demonetized, and then when I tried questioning Keir Starmer because he happened to be walking along from Scotland Yard to Parliament, which was a little bit weird. A few people think that was a setup, but I went up and I said, "Why have you not been representing working class? Because you're meant to be the Labour Party." I said, "Why is it you're meant to be leader of the opposition and you didn't oppose lockdowns? And why is it you went after Julian Assange when you're head of the Crown Prosecution Service?" Well, after asking him those questions as a journalist, I got is it slandered? Yeah, slandered on live air by Channel 4. They did their own extra hit piece up on me. We got attacked in a bunch of MSM ranks. We got multiple strikes on our YouTube channel. We ended up in a situation where we had to delete. I think it was almost we already deleted a lot of our live streams, but I think it was about 15 million views worth of videos.
Wow. But
We,
did you get name checked on all those things?
oh yeah, mate. I even had them ascribing false names to me.
Oh, that's
You
not.
know,
I was just thinking at least it's some publicity to get, Resistance GB the name
oh yeah,
known.
yeah, but what they used to do is they called us an activist group. It's like, what protests am I organising?
Mm,
Show me this protest that I'm organising. I'm not there as an activist. Am I holding a placard and protesting? I'm not. I'm going up asking people questions and I'm interviewing members of the public. This is called journalism. But
mm.
what happened was, look, at the start, the winter of 2020, early 2021 was horrific. It was freezing cold. And the numbers were so low it was very easy to be picked off. Right, the police were outnumbering most of the protesters, and lots of people just didn't have the balls to come out. And I do hold it against people, but I'm glad people came out eventually. But during that winter, it was extremely difficult because if there are two coppers for every one of you, you are very threatened. They are coming up to you. You're not able to dodge away. Even when at me with doing my journalism, the amount of times threatened, being beaten up several times with low numbers, it was not easy at the start. But as the crowds grew, it became easier and easier, and it went from strength to strength. But it was when sort of we got hit with the whole Starmer thing that basically we had to just purge our videos from YouTube, and it was a really sad day for us because
Yeah, no, I can.
can you
I can well
imagine the
be.
amount of lovely comments? Those comments were all part of history, and we had to delete them. Like when we're talking about comments, we're talking about if 15 million views. We're talking about maybe a million or more comments that were
Yeah,
just deleted, all of that feedback, everything. But this, well, I mean, Heiko Ku puts it best. It's sort of like digital book burning, isn't it? They put you in a situation where you just can't do anything else. But by doing that, by adopting a scorched earth tactic, we saved the channel. And in the last, 5 months, we have really got back into the swing of things. We've been out there live streaming occasionally, and we've launched our podcast once a week, Thursday 7 p.m. every week. We've got a new podcast guest. Usually they're quite sort of high profile. Occasionally we have sort of a few mid to low profile ones. The guy last week was just so amazing. I went, okay, you are going to be a podcast guest. You're too good, even though I've never heard of you. No one knows who you are. But we like our podcast is going really well. And then at the end of each month, so last Thursday of each month, we do a live in-person podcast. So the first one we did, which was last month, was with Graham Moore. That went fantastically. I think we had, what, 70, 80 people down there in the room. It's Finsbury Park, the Night Owl, which is right next to Finsbury Park Station. So it's really great for commute. You literally just walk across the bus station, you're there. And we had the fantastic band Raw Milk Conspiracy. Have you had Raw Milk on yet to interview?
No, I drink raw
You
milk, but I haven't had the band on. That
Oh,
would be
the
good.
the band is excellent. Yeah, so Raw Milk was fantastic, and then this month coming up, I've got a leaflet for it here. We got Kate Shemirani, and supported by Whom by Fire, who are another fantastic band. And there's a sort of handsome gentleman down here. I don't know who that could be.
No, I can't
Um,
possibly.
but yeah, that's on the 31st. So we've got a sort of Halloween theme if people want. Um, you can
To
dress up
dress
as
up, yeah.
you can dress up. I don't know if Kate Shemirani's gonna do fancy dress, but it also coincides. That's 2 days after our fourth birthday, so I think we're gonna have a birthday cake as well.
Fantastic. Well,
Four
that
years of
sounds good.
Resistance GB.
Yeah. Well, this is it. So where can people find you?
People can find us on resistancegb.org or resistancegb.com. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. Please, if people go onto Twitter and help share our little clips, it really, really, really helps boost the video. Also, I've got to shout out our work with Defiance Records, if that's okay.
Of course.
So I think I said earlier we're hosting different songs by Defiance artists, their Freedom record label. So we've just had Remise, Never Give Up. We've had Mad Mixes, Right Wing, which is great. We've also had Raw Milk Conspiracies, Misinformation Whore. We're working with these bands to basically get freedom music out to people. I mean, with Mad Mixes track and Remises, I've actually got down here from Defiance. It's going to be a double A side release next year, which is going to be excellent. So they're going to do a double A side single vinyl, and you'll be able to download both tracks on the 25th of October. So I think this is just really important to reclaiming the culture. If you want to find more about Defiance Records, that's defiancerecords.com. And yeah, it's got loads. It's sort of bringing together a lot of people. So there's Trevor John on there, Winter, Remise, Raw Milk Conspiracy, Whom by Fire, Mick Gallagher from the Blockheads, Victorious, Due to Anarchy, and the Resistance, and also some of the girls from Hope Sussex. So we're trying to bring together as much of the sort of freedom music end as possible. Which I think is wonderful. And our live night is basically an opportunity to host music from freedom bands, a new freedom band each month, a new guest each month, and whatever we make from this basically goes to support our journalism. So if people come down, and it was it a £5 recommended donation. So if people want to come down, chuck us £5, it's a great night just in and of itself. And I'm sure people love Kate Shemirani. So do come down if you can. Will you be coming down? Have I sold you?
Have you sold me on the 25th of October? I'm probably stuck here doing
On the
interviews. and whatever.
31st of October.
Oh, is it? Oh, on
31st.
Halloween.
Yes.
Who knows? I'll have to check my diary. I don't
What
know
would you
my
dress
diary.
as? That's the question.
Probably Uncle Fester is what everybody says.
What would suit me? What should I go as?
Oh gosh, there's a question.
See, the thing is, if you dress up as anything, people go, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's demonic! It's demonic!"
Yes, that's very true. Well, it is the that night when, but you know, people can do that. Do a bit of apple bobbing. You know, something simple like that. I'd probably end up being an apple bobbed, which would not be very useful. Willsy, it's been lovely to talk to you. Sorry about the earlier technical issue in which we did a good half an hour's podcast in depth, and it was really good, but we didn't record it. But thank you for coming on the show and being a guest for me, and thank you for asking me back then in the summer to be a guest. Did that go down well with the viewers, or did they all turn off in their droves?
Oh, that was absolutely fantastic. People loved it. I think people love your interviews, but they also, at a certain point, they want to know more about you and where you're coming from. So I think the universe is, you know, this is a great opportunity because the host is interviewing the host.
Yes.
So I think this is
I
big
try not
change.
to do too much of that sort of, you know, mutual hosting, because I always think this is an opportunity for unseen voices. However, it is every now and again a good thing to pass the love on, and you know, it particularly. I mean, I'm incredibly privileged that the channel grew up so very quickly, and I do try to help anybody who's setting up a channel to get them viewers if they've got the right sort of message. So it's been a pleasure to have you and your team, because I know it's not just you now, to be on the show or representing the show. So thank you so much for coming in, and I hope people will go in their droves to resistancegb.org and find out what you're up to.
And come to our live night on the 31st. It's going to be fantastic. Finsbury Park, night owl, doors open 5:30. Please do come down. Kate Shemrani's guest, Whom by Fire, fantastic freedom band. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. You've got the challenge. Meanwhile, I will be back, of course, with more monologues and more wonderful guests. But in the meantime, from Willsy and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.